Now, I like a bit of traditional fantasy with my elves and dwarves and dragons and goblins and such, and that's really great and really enjoyable and really fun, and I have a mindset to easily fit into that world and come up with stories and stuff. But sometimes it's nice to mess things around a bit. I mean, if you think about a game like Dark Venture or Dungeon Degenerates, then it's taken a fantasy idea and really spun it into something really extraordinary. And in order to create a more unusual setting to work in, you can either go out and buy a setting book of something a little bit different, or you could get a game with a very specific and strong theme in mind. This one is sort of a bit like Alien, that kind of thing. But you don't always have to buy a book to not that one to come up with unusual settings like that. Now, one thing you can do is to take a setting you like from a book that you've read or a film that you've watched and just use that, or you could take two and mash them up. For instance, my first thoughts today were of Frankenstein and the Forever War. And this is a little bit dark, but if you can imagine a war just perpetually going on, and the people who were pushing the war, who were behind it, had figured out that they could keep the war going perpetually if they reconstructed their casualties. Now, so each soldier could be rebuilt if they were killed in action. Now, that's a very dark idea. It will be a very grim, dark sort of setting. But if you then imagine that hundreds or thousands of years later, throughout this conflict, eventually the people pushing the war had become extinct from a sudden event. The people on the ground, the constructs, don't know what that is, but all of a sudden their orders have stopped. So they're left on this world without any orders pushing them to continue fighting, and they have to reevaluate what's going on. They are virtually immortal. Perhaps the means of recreating broken soldiers in this world were automated, so they are factories heavily protected that the casualties can be sent to and reconstructed. Now, how those constructs formulate their new society is something. Powerful generals could perhaps set themselves up as warlords and start putting together their own city-states. But this world of virtually immortal constructs in the ruins of a 1,000-year-old war could be something a little bit different, maybe. And if it turns out that somebody else has thought of that in a book or something that you've not heard of, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't have to be original, because it's just a bit of fun. And as long as it's refreshing and interesting to you, then your mashup is all yours, and you should take it and run with it. And another method for coming up with an unusual setting is our old friend Rory's Story Cubes. So if we take the original set here, and it's always important to remember the only rule with Rory's Story Cubes is that there are no wrong answers and there are no wrong interpretations, because it's all about what the pictures suggest to you in the moment. So let us give these a shake and see what we come up with. Now, this makes me think of a novel that I've not actually read, The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. It takes place, I believe, towards the end of the universe. If you can imagine a world in darkness, and perhaps centered around an ancient ruin, maybe a ziggurat or a pyramid, something like that, or some ancient temple type building, and the people there are living, orbiting a dying sun, and time is finite, very much so, and the population are perhaps quite generally old, because young uns are not coming along for some reason. So they are looking into the jaws of eternity, if you like, as they wait for the dying star to eventually snuff itself out. And this setting is sort of the backdrop for their quests, maybe. I'm getting a sort of Dying Earth kind of vibe, a bit of Jack Vance maybe. But I'm imagining a group of sages perhaps has gathered at the end of time around this ancient monument, and they are using the power of the negative energy from the dying sun. I've been reading this about negative energy, and they are using that to open portals to other places, so they can travel anywhere in time and space, perhaps, in order to look for a way to escape the end, or to chronicle unusual events, maybe before the end of the universe. Something like that, anyway. Or we could have another go. Oops. Let's see what we come up with this time. This immediately makes me think of Alpha Complex, an all-seeing, ever-present artificial intelligence, and a trainee troubleshooter type who is in constant communication with the AI, is in some sort of future complex. I'm just thinking paranoia. What about the bees and the dice? There is genuine randomness to wherever they are. Perhaps it is an ever-changing maze. Perhaps they are inside the computer, and it is, a little crazy maybe. And the world that they're in, the virtual world, is ever-changing, and they can go in any possible direction. But perhaps they are sent into this virtual world by the computer in order to solve mysteries within a time limit. Perhaps the random world shifts every so often, so they have to solve each mystery, each problem, within a time limit. Now, bees, well, they are basically, the troubleshooter is basically a worker drone. These any characters in this virtual world are drones working for the computer, but some of them go a bit wrong and no longer function according to their programming, and so they have to be investigated and dealt with by the trainee troubleshooter or other troubleshooters trying to sort this out, to root out the bad apples in the otherwise perfectly functioning hive of workers in this virtual world. Perhaps that's what it could be. And another great resource for coming up with unusual settings is art, either in books or online. I mean, if you just look at a picture like this and think, what on earth is going on there? This might suggest that the characters would be kind of strange, powerful energy beings, almost immortal, exploring very unusual alien worlds. But any random fantasy or sci-fi art could perhaps be put together. This tower could perhaps be related in some way to that galaxy. Perhaps there's some kind of connection between the two. Just reading in any unusual little details that you can think of. This looks, for instance, like a traffic jam trying to land on a planet. But there are some very unusual pictures in here, and they're quite inspiring. They certainly inspired me when I read it all those years ago. we go, Fantor Gorth. This is the Space Warriors by Stuart Cowley, but a lot of the art is seemingly put together at random, and that's, I think the art was assembled first and the story fit around the art, but that means this is basically a book full of amazing art, which you can interpret for your own purposes. I mean, if there was a massive ocean world with just one tiny island and your character lived on that could maybe give you some ideas. There's an ocean world again. Wow. I won't go all the way through, but anything you can find online or in a sci-fi fantasy art book, there's another strange one, can fire off your imagination. That looks very high, sort of sci-fi fantasy kind of thing. Wow. A very, perhaps there could be an unusual order of powerful beings that travelled the universe solving problems. So there we go. But of course there's plenty of art available to see and be inspired by online as well.